Welcome to our 6th edition of FSI Fridays. I'm Edwin, one of your co-hosts out of Boston, joined by Johansson and Charlotte. As a quick reminder, we'll spend 30 minutes talking on today's topic and leave the last 15 minutes to address any burning questions. Please use the Q&A window and we'll monitor during the presentation. So Johansson, happy Friday. What exciting session do we have in store for today?
Thanks, Edwin. I'm excited to introduce Tom DePew, our rockstar principal technical specialist, who I've personally had the pleasure of working with over the years. And he brings, a typically boring topic, pretty fun, actually. So, Tom, what do you mean by data guardianship?
Sure. Data guardianship is getting control and being able to leverage all corporate data assets. While key data assets are typically controlled by enterprise applications, there are a host of other data assets that end up either staying on employees' hard drives or they simply are discarded. Data guardianship is a strategy that starts to leverage tools to help our customers get their hands around their data assets, whether those apps live in enterprise systems or are the byproduct of other work.
So, Tom, can you tell us a little bit more about corporate data assets and what that means?
Sure. When you think corporate data, there are several things that you do with it. You will access it, automate, route, or direct it, transform it, and finally you analyze that data. For example, you are authorized to access a customer record and you pull it from an enterprise system. Once you have that data, you see that they are a high-value customer, so you route that data to someone who works with high-value customers. An employee will now transform all related information from other systems to get a single, unified view of the customer's financial standing. Lastly, you will review that consolidated view of data to analyze what the customer might need to do next.
So, Tom, I know our financial services customers are doing this today, but have issues in managing all of that corporate data, regardless of kind of where it is. What type of issues are they facing?
So, of course, there are some issues to work with data in this way. Here are a list of some of the things that you may run into or that our customers may run into, but there are probably other issues that need to be confronted. The key point is that corporate data is a valuable asset, and we use applications to manage that data.
So, Tom, do you have a point of view on the applications that are used to kind of manage these corporate data assets? I know, our financial services customers use things like Excel very commonly, but, I'm sure that there are other applications as well.
Sure. Let me show you a few ideas about the application. So conceptually, let's use this empty box to represent all the data you need to manage corporate data, all the applications you need to manage corporate data. You're the CIO and you're going to start working with your business teams to fill in the blank space. First, you're going to come in with your major enterprise applications. CRM, ERP, and line of business applications will do the heavy lifting for your data. As you know, Johansson, they don't manage everything, but they do cover many of the data management needs. Next, you may get a series of point applications. Hopefully they interoperate, but you are going to acquire different applications that have specific purposes. These applications don't necessarily have the heft of the previous apps, but they perform important functions. Sometimes they hold their own data, and other times they connect to the enterprise systems. Next, once you get past that, now you're going to work with IT to build applications. A department may need to maintain the data for departmental needs of some kind. The application may create its own data, or it may use data that lives in the other applications. IT is required to go through a full SDLC process, which with all the time and overhead required. But the question is, the question arises, what happens to the needs that are still unsatisfied? Every business has this issue, and it's an issue that we've seen our customers wrestle with.
Yeah, Tom, you make a good point. I mean, this sounds like a big issue, and we're sure it's something that all financial services customers face. How are they handling it today?
Edwin, what many of our customers are seeing is the rise of what's called the EUC, or end-user compute applications. It is sometimes called decentralized IT. These are often Excel spreadsheets or Access databases, but of course there are other approaches as well. Here are some of the reasons that they arise. IT resources are constrained, but the business continues to evolve and grow. It is easier than ever to move data around, and the technical sophistication of users means that they are more comfortable building their own applications to satisfy their business needs. In response, sometimes our customers will respond by trying to lock down all of that activity until it can go through the IT process. Others recognize the need for those EUCs, and so are just trying to get their hands around the problem.
I mean, Tom, wow, this sounds like a real challenge. On one hand, locking things down means that you're probably going to be slow to respond to changes that are needed. And on the other hand, if you just let it be the Wild West, you open your company to potential regulatory concerns. How do you strike a balance?
It's a great question, Edwin. From this situation, what we really find is, and this is where we have looked, and Microsoft has come with PowerApps. PowerApps is really designed to strike that balance, to get all the IT security controls and the security controls, but also give all the low no-code empowerment to end users so they can be those citizen developers who can build the applications that they need so they can really respond at the speed of business. Let me give you an example. Let's take a couple of minutes to hear how Schlumberger managed their experience from centralized to decentralized IT, all the way from those enterprise applications we discussed to the citizen developed applications.
Tom, while the video is loading, when you say, low code, no code, that can mean a lot of things. Is it that, someone without coding experience can develop this? What are the types of skills that are needed to, make this successful?
Edwin, it's a great question. And what you think about as a low code platform, the ultimate low code platform, I think, is Excel. People have been using Excel for a long time to manage their data needs. Well, Excel has, and it's great at it, but it doesn't have all of those controls. And so
also our central.
Looks like we have the video.
Yeah, you can continue that thought, though. I mean, it's really important because are you saying someone with Excel skills would be able to take advantage of this pretty quickly, or is there some training needed?
And that really is, you put your finger right on it, Edwin, is that someone with even just Excel skills is able to go ahead and take advantage of PowerApps. And what's really interesting about that is we have a one-day training, we call it App in a Day. But the point is that someone with only those Excel skills, by the end of that day, has developed a fully functional application. It's really pretty remarkable to see. And when customers see that they have that level of enablement, they get very excited. But the advantage for the IT side of the house is all of the controls that they've come to expect are present in PowerApps. So really, as we were talking about earlier, to be able to strike that balance on the two sides, that's really the pretty remarkable thing.
I think it's remarkable because, I graduated with a computer science degree 20 years ago. I probably haven't coded back then, but I know I've tinkered around with PowerApps and, I've been able to build something pretty quickly. So it's really important, again, that aspect of these are some, skills I have, but now I can build something way better than, just taking a couple of weeks that a developer might need to do, and it just saves a lot of time. So I'm thankful that you're bringing this to our attention. And I guess without further ado, let's roll the video.
But in order to take creativity, innovation to the next level, you saw the amazing things Alan's team does. They're a digital cell. They're a local, fast-moving, high-performing IT organization based in the region, right, in Europe, that can build as partner with the business. They understand what the business needs are. They're part of the strategy sessions for the business, and they can build these fast-moving applications to really meet their needs. And for us, this is where the beginning of why the Power Platform is really powerful. You can see how rapidly we can deploy solutions, right? The great story of taking students a couple months out, and they're building software for a multinational company with applications being used in 10 countries across Europe with 800 users, 900 users in 2 weeks. That's real software. That was a big wake-up call for us, like, whoa, we have to think about this, right? But then if you look at the whole strategy and how extensible and scalable the platform is, especially around CDS and CDM. For us on the pro dev side, if we're going to act in collaboration as a COE and take these amazing products that are being built on the Power Platform and really build them up and make them enterprise grade, I think for us it's very, very amazing. And you combine that with our big focus on self-service. We have a huge initiative on employee self-service.
Tom, this is, fantastic stuff, right? I think Schlumberger is a great example of, what they can do here, where they, really able to take that development time and really, speed that up. So, we're working with a customer, a shared customer today, and they have this exact same problem where, they have tens of thousands of these kind of end user type applications. How are we kind of approaching them to kind of solve this from a financial services perspective?
And that's where all of the controls, those IT controls, Johansson, that we talked about come into play. What you saw with Schlumberger, you saw them look at really their kind of their data estate all the way from those enterprise applications all the way down to the things that people are doing with Excel spreadsheets. And they started moving all those into a common place. So when you look at what we're doing for the customer that you referenced, we're really taking advantage of that platform. But then, in fact, the PowerApps platform itself is composed of those different pieces, right? To be able to establish the IT controls. But the next step that we're taking is, and I think that's what we're going to talk about in the next section, is how we start getting our hands around that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it, right, Tom? It's, they have all these applications, but they don't really have control over all of them, right? Where that data is, where it's going, how their end users are even using it. They're really losing control, and these users in their organization need to spin up these kind of quick apps that they're trying to do inside of Excel. But we're taking them to the next level by transforming how they're thinking about rapidly deploying, beyond just the traditional Excel, but leveraging our Power Platform. So you want to talk about the Power Platform here?
Yeah, and thank you, Johansson. So here is the Power Platform. It's really made up of 4 pieces, and that is that it's Power BI for analytics, Power Apps for applications. Automate is that workflow, and really that integration piece. And lastly, virtual agents for building robust, scalable, interactive agents, natural language kinds of things.
Yeah, so what I think you're getting at is it's not really replacing your existing applications per se, but rather taking a step back and getting all of your data management needs satisfied. And it's true, we've also seen where a friend at the company will get you a spreadsheet with the data you need, and then you massage that data to get the results that you require out of it. You also seem to imply that just locking things down will make you less nimble. That kind of makes sense, since IT needs to maintain those controls in place to protect the company. Now, if a company accepts that and they need to empower their business units to build applications, how are they going to get their hands around it? How are they going to discover that there's a new spreadsheet, for example?
So yeah, that's a great question, Johansson. So let's really take a look at how that process can play out. So what you see here is the file activity signal data, such as when you create or update an Excel spreadsheet. That metadata is going to be extracted, and then we'll go ahead and present that to an AI model. You can use AI model to determine whether or not it's a potential EUC. If it is, you have a choice. You can confirm some information by automatically interacting with the owner of the EUC, or you can actually pass it directly for final determination, which includes a risk assessment. Once the EUC goes into the backlog, just as you saw with Schlumberger, you can either allocate IT resources to build it, or you can empower the EUC owner to build the application themselves. You can quickly train them and then get them to you can give them the tools to build very robust applications.
No, Tom, I like how you helped visualize this. I'm a very visual person. So what is that item that you have at the bottom of the screen labeled corporate data assets? What does that really mean?
This potentially is an option that will give companies the ability to begin leveraging data assets that today are being wasted. The payback potential is amazing. For example, if you have 10,000 people working with EUCs at a company, and each spends 5 hours weekly manipulating data, then you have 50,000 hours of effort being expended that most often is lost. If you could even recapture 10% of that or re-leverage that, that would be 5,000 hours of labor per week. At a fully loaded cost of around $80, that represents $400,000 of value captured every week, or $20 million during the year. And that's only if you recapture 10%. What if you're able to recapture, say, 20%? The point is that exploring this with our customers can have a real impact. It's not just a technology story, but it's about working with our customers to start viewing all corporate data as a real asset.
I love saving time to be more efficient. That's definitely something I think all of us strive for. And this all looks fantastic. However, those who are watching this discussion want to see how it works, right? Again, I'm visual. I want to see how it's done. Can you show us how this all comes into play?
Absolutely. I put something together for our viewers to see how this process can be enabled. And we'll use that data to predict whether or not something is an EUC candidate. Today, we're going to make just a binary decision, is yes or no. But you may have different outcomes that you might want to examine and predict. From there, then, we will go ahead and survey the EUC owner for additional information. With that additional information, we will make a final determination of the EUC status, and then we'll enter the EUC into the EUC backlog.
Tom, so one of the things you spoke about in the video was a predictive model. Some of our viewers may not know what a predictive model is. Can you tell us what that means?
Sure. A predictive model is an AI model that predicts or anticipates, if you will, something in the future. In our case, we're trying to predict if one of the files that we found is a possible EUC candidate. What makes a predictive model so interesting to use in this context is that it not only can make a prediction, but it also can tell us the strength of that prediction. Put another way, it can indicate how certain it is that it's a, that it's a prediction that matches one of the examples that have been given.
That's interesting. So you're actually using AI to initiate a hands-off process to help our customers discover these EUCs. Can you tell us a little bit more about that model? It seems that to be successful, our viewers will need to understand how that works.
Sure. Let's go ahead and take a look at how that model works. For today's demonstration, we're going to start with this particular application. Now, I actually created this application just so that I would have a way to show you what's happening in that process. As we mentioned earlier, the idea behind this initial set of activity is for it to be a hands-off process. But again, for demonstration purposes, we have an application that allows us to review certain elements of the data. So the first thing that you're seeing here is the training data set. Now, there is approximately 10,000 rows of data that I used to train this model, and I purposely built in certain biases, which I'll talk about shortly. But training data is essential to build a proper AI model. Next, let me show you what the AI model itself looks like. Here is the model that we'll be using today. You can see that my model has a B rating, meaning that it was able to correctly predict 86% of actual results. Now, this is based on the biases that I built into the data, but that is a pretty good outcome. Also, I can even see which attributes were most predictive of the final result, whether or not this would be an EUC. I can see created date, because created date would influence how long the file has endured, file size, modified date, file name, and the number of macros present. And we'll see how all of those together will influence whether or not something is predicted as being an EUC. Presence of a new possible EUC is known. We're going to go ahead and simulate that by creating it here. So I create a new file metadata. I'm going to just call it testing data.xls. The author, we'll put down myself as the author, Tom DePew. We'll assume that this will be predicted. let's say it's modified by Alicia Thomber. This is one of the predictors that we included in the training data set. So we're going to go back and we'll say that this was created on March 1st, and the last modified date, let's just say it was last Friday. File size is 150,000 bytes. And we're going to put 8 macros. Tagging, this is something that you may want to institute in your company as a best practice. I'm just going to say testing, and the file generation is 2. So now once I save this, we can take a look and we can see that here are all of the elements, and all of those have predictive power based on our earlier model that I showed you. The tagging and the file generation don't, simply because I didn't include that, but that may be something you want to consider for your particular model. Now, once I change the state of this particular metadata file, I'm going to change it to start model. Once I save that, there is a script in the background that's going to pick that up, and it's going to determine that it is in the proper state. It's going to go ahead and run the model, and we can see the results. So through the magic of video, I was able to compress that time frame a little bit. It ended up taking about 30 seconds to pick it up, run the model, and bring back the results. So you can see that the EUC status has changed back to prediction. You can see that this particular file, testingdata.xls, is indeed an EUC candidate. And if you look down below, I can even see how likely it is, and that's the way you can consider this. So a 0.58. The way the model works is anything 0.5 and above is considered yes, and below 0.5 is considered no. Now, what's good for your organization is you can tighten up this criteria. If you want to run more through the manual process, you can go ahead and say anything below a certain level, let's say 0.6 or 0.5. Maybe that's where you want to draw the line, and say anything above that, I should say, can go become part of the go through the manual process. Or if you want to go ahead and tighten up on that, you might say if it has to be at least 0.8, and then you want to run it through the manual process. So this is, I call it a knob, but this is something that you can adjust to make it right for your organization. So what you saw is that I simulated the discovery of a potential EUC, was able to run it through the AI model. Now I had trained the model with test data. So for our viewers, it's really important that they get a good training data set of both ones that were successful, in other words, EUC candidates, and ones that were not.
Yeah, Tom, you make a good point there. So I suspect that better data means better results, right?
You got it. What you saw were the results of the model. In production, it would automatically advance to the next state in the process, but it's important for our viewers to understand what's going on. It is easy to build biases into the training data. So as I mentioned a moment ago, it's very important to have a diverse training data set, and one that encompasses both EUC candidates and ones that were not, and that will demonstrate the kinds of identification that our customers would be looking for.
So Tom, at this point, once we have identified the EUC candidate, what's the next step in the process? Does it get sent to the EUC backlog, as you showed us earlier, or do you need to do something else?
Ideally, having a hands-off process would be the best way for our customers to deal with this situation. Many of our customers, and Johansson mentioned one at the outset, are dealing with literally thousands of these files, and it proliferates every day as new needs arise and new EUCs are created. What's more, our customers may keep certain things in Excel and decide they don't need to be converted. Over time, those Excel files may actually become EUC candidates. So the point is that it may need to interact with you may need to interact with the EUC owner to best understand the right course of action. So let me show you an automated way to go ahead and create that survey that you send to the EUC owner, and then they can respond, and based on the responses, we can determine if it is indeed an EUC candidate. So you can see that I do have a result. It has essentially 58% confidence that this is in fact an EUC candidate. We can see the prediction here. I'm going to manually kick it into the next stage, and then let's look at what happens when we get a request for the survey to the EUC owner. So we can see here that we've received an email, and that email has a link to a survey. And so let's go ahead and perform that survey. When I click on the link, it will go ahead and open a new window with the series of questions. For our purposes, the responses aren't as interesting because these, of course, you can adjust for your purposes. So we'll just go through, answer the questions, and then we will submit the results. Those questions, of course, can be according to your particular business needs. When I submit those results, they are going to be submitted, and then we have another script that will run, which will go ahead and kick that into the next state. So now let's take a look at the results. So I took the survey, and this is what we call the deterministic portion of the survey. And what that simply means is it's rule-based. We're not actually trying to make a prediction. We're simply saying, here's a set of rules. If these conditions exist, then give me this output. So you can see that the survey results, I've changed the status automatically to survey results. I can see that this is, in fact, an EUC candidate. And of course, this is not going to change. Now, one of the opportunities that you do have is that as you run through this process, you can go ahead and say, let's say, for example, that the EUC candidacy had been no. If that had been the result, but the prediction was yes, then this could be something that could be used to feed back into the model to raise its prediction accuracy. But this is the process now. So we've gone through the survey results, and now we're ready to look at our EUC backlog. So if I switch views here, let me go ahead and click on this. And now I'm going to go ahead and look at my EUC backlog. You can see that indeed I have all of the testing data.xls, which we just did. And I have several other files that are in my EUC backlog ready to be worked, ready to be prioritized for conversion into a Power App. So you can use deterministic rules to decide what to do with the EUCs and then put them into backlog. EUCs are one element of data guardianship where our customers are able to get their hands around the entire data estate, all the way from those large enterprise apps down to those Excel spreadsheets, or what were Excel spreadsheets in our Power Apps, to really control the entire data estate and be able to get maximum leverage and create maximum value for their organizations.
Tom, that's very interesting. What you showed us will help us get our hands around decentralized IT. It's a huge problem in financial services. Clearly, Power Platform is an important tool that helps our customers can use both to manage that decentralized IT all up, but also manage the individual solutions that are important to those business users. So how much has Microsoft built to help our customers do what you described? It seems like there are a series of processes that will be required for customers to get a hand around all of these different issues.
You can see here that Microsoft has been busy thinking about how our customers can both empower decentralized IT, but also retain control of the data, ensure that developers of all skill levels are able to build quality applications. We even built something called the Center of Excellence, or COE Starter Kit, using PowerApps, Power BI, and Power Automate to help our customers get their hands around decentralized IT and really empower developers at all skill levels. Customers can add on to this starter kit and include additional tools to meet their organizational needs. We have spent a lot of time talking about EUCs because it is a vital component to getting our hands around the data estate. So much decentralized IT activity is done through Excel spreadsheets or Lotus Notes or any of 100 other approaches that business owners use to break the IT logjam. This process we talked about today will help our customers be even better guardians of the data that make their companies work.
So no, thanks, Tom. What you see on the slide here is, the capabilities that Microsoft has done for Power Platform governance, right? I think governance and control for our financial services customers is of the utmost importance. Could you just touch a little bit on some of the elements that we see on the slide?
Sure, and really the idea of governance, and this is a topic I think Johansson, that people really want to get their hands around, and that is to be able to have really IT controls or IT level controls or quality controls, but to be able to enable at the same time end users to be able to build these applications is pretty phenomenal. The way that I like to think of it is in the old model, it's command and control, right? And IT runs all of those applications. In a new model, it becomes more of a coach and collaborate. It's a really collaboration between IT and the business to create the applications up and down that spectrum of applications we talked about to really run and manage the business. All the tools you see here on the screen are all the processes and tools together are really what enable IT organizations to empower their business users to get their hands around the data they need.
Tom, thank you for sharing your thoughts on data guardianship with our audience. Corporate data is more than just enterprise apps, but is created through value-creating activities. Using the Power Platform, our financial services customers can have a chance to get their hands around this critical and vital asset.
Yeah, Johansson, I completely agree. Tom, thanks for the insightful session. This has definitely been a fun session. So let's take some Q&A. We do have a few questions from the audience asking how you can get the metadata and signal data. Can you elaborate on that, Tom?
Sure, and this is it's an interesting thing because we've been looking at different ways to do it. For example, if you use OneDrive to go ahead and store data, OneDrive has an event model. So Power Automate can monitor OneDrive events, and then once you identify the file, now you can use Python or another technique to go ahead and extract the metadata. Once you have the metadata, then that process works as you saw it earlier in the discussion.
So, Tom, we have another question here in the chat window from Frank, who's asking us about how organizations can get started with this. This whole concept is great, but how can a customer get started with the Power Platform? How easy it is? Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. Couple of thoughts there is the first thing is identify one or two use cases. Identify one or two things that say, here's a really important application. We'd like to go ahead and see if we can go ahead and convert this into a Power App. That's where a lot of our customers start. The second thing is to go ahead and participate in an app in a day session. And if you work with your account team to go ahead and schedule that and put that together, that's the other thing that you can do in order to get started. And I think we mentioned it earlier in our discussion. We've had users who just basically were Excel users, came in at the beginning of the session, and in a one-day session, they're able to go ahead and actually create Power Apps. And that's a pretty phenomenal thing.
So I got another question in here that's coming from Stacy that is talking about, do I need a developer to do all these things? You're talking about apps, and usually when we talk about apps, it's developers. Do I need someone with a development experience? What type of experience does someone need to get started with the Power Platform?
That's a great question, because that's the great thing about Power Apps is you don't need to be a developer. By training, I'm a developer. I started out my career a long time ago as a heads down developer. But what I've seen is business owners, business users actually be able to take and own the Power Platform and be able to develop with it. We have one customer, for example, Johansson, a very interesting case where somebody who is on the front lines of the organization, just a field installer really for this, or field person for this company, was able to learn the Power Apps and actually became a key developer for this company, and really is in charge now of developing Power Apps for the organization. Has no IT background, and it just was a question of taking the time to go ahead and learn and then apply it to what he saw in his business.
So, Tom, we've got another question in here just around kind of data, where the data lives. Does the data always have to live in the cloud? Can we take advantage of data that lives in maybe some on-premises infrastructure?
Right, and that's one thing we weren't able to cover completely during our discussion, but what we call the data integration or the connector technology, you can have standardized connectors, you can have custom connectors for non-standard data sources, and the other thing that you can do, and this is where it becomes really interesting, is you can actually connect to on-premise data. So on-premise data is really that where a lot of data lives for, especially in financial services. That on-premise data is a place where you can also have that same kind of connector technology and be able to access data there. So the short answer is you can really get to any data no matter where it lives.
And I think that's, super powerful, right? Specifically, as we talk to our financial services customers that have a lot of this kind of, restricted data that lives kind of in their on-premises data estate, getting the ability to be able to build these kind of quick applications on the fly with minimal time and leverage that data, is really, really powerful. Thanks again for attending and all the live questions. Be sure to give us any of your feedback at aka.ms FSI Fridays feedback. You can also use that link if you want to get a follow-up from Microsoft around how you can get started with some of the programs that Tom talked about with App in a Day. Also, be sure to check out our YouTube channel with all of the various different recordings that we've done for FSI Fridays. Be sure to like and subscribe so you get those notifications when those new videos come out. And we've got, the rest of July coming up in here. But, Edwin, do you want to tell us, our audience, what's coming up next?
Absolutely. I'm excited. So next week we have on July 31st, Chris Shanku will cover how within financial services, the event management, both internally and externally, are challenged to coordinate with signups to managing acceptances to sending invites and follow-ups with the capabilities of Power Platform. Come learn about how you can automate this process end to end. We're also excited to launch Azure and AI August. So we got some really cool topics around intelligent payments. One of my favorite titles so far, what happens in the call center shouldn't stay there. We have different Azure customer success stories that are resonating right now and a journey to responsible AI. So we hope to see you next week as well as August. And, thank you everyone for attending today. Have a nice weekend.
Thanks, everyone.